All right, Donald Trump. He's got to be one of the most famous people on earth, right? But with all the news, all the headlines, who is he really? We're going to dig into some surprising facts, stuff you probably haven't heard that paints a totally different picture. So let's get into it.
You know, it's so easy to feel like we know these big public figures. We see them everywhere. But their actual stories, the weird side quests, the personal habits, the huge risks they took early on, a lot of that just gets buried. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to peel back some of those layers.
Okay, so let's kick things off with something that honestly defined him way before he ever got into politics. And that's this idea of him being the ultimate showman.
So you see, this year, 2007, what's that all about? Well, that's the year he got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And get this, it wasn't for his buildings. It was for his TV show, The Apprentice. I mean, that show was a massive hit and made "You're fired" a catchphrase everyone knew.
And his knack for entertainment? Oh, it went way beyond just regular TV. He was seriously involved with the WWE for a long time, hosted WrestleManias, you name it. He was even in the Battle of the Billionaires, where he, yes, literally shaved Vince McMahon's head right in the middle of the ring. That kind of over-the-top stuff is exactly why he ended up in the WWE Hall of Fame.
But his showmanship wasn't always on a huge stage. Sometimes it was on a telephone. Okay, so get this. Back in the 80s and 90s, reporters would get these calls from a guy named John Barron, or John Miller, who would just rave about how great Donald Trump was doing. The punchline? It was widely alleged that John Barron was, well, Trump himself acting as his own PR guy. Some journalists even said they had him on tape.
Okay, so this instinct for a big performance, it wasn't just for show. It spilled right over into his business dealings. Which brings us to our next section, a gambler in business. Think high risk, high reward, and sometimes no reward at all. Case in point, the Trump shuttle. So back in 1989, he buys this airline, right? The Eastern Air Shuttle. It was already making money, but he rebrands it, goes all out with the Trump treatment. We're talking fancy marble-looking floors, gold-plated everything. Problem was, it was incredibly expensive to run, the debt piled up, and poof! By 1992, the whole thing was over. A huge gamble that quite literally never took off.
And that wasn't a one-off. Remember the USFL? The football league from the 80s? Well, he owned a team, the New Jersey Generals, and he was a really influential owner. He's the one who really pushed for the league to go head-to-head with the NFL by moving their games to the fall. A super risky move, and one that sports historians pretty much agree was the main thing that ended up sinking the entire league.
All right, so you see this big number, 6. What is that? That's how many times his companies have filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Now, this is a really important distinction. We're talking about his hotel and casino businesses, not him personally. He's always described it as a smart business move, you know? Not a failure, but just using the law to reorganize debt and come out stronger.
Okay, so we've got the showman, we've got the business gambler. But what about the person behind all that? The man behind the public persona? This is where things get really interesting.
Now here is a wild contrast. You see his name on wineries, right? His parties are famous. But Donald Trump himself, he's a complete teetotaler, doesn't touch alcohol, and there's a really serious personal reason why. His older brother Fred Jr. struggled with alcoholism and passed away from it. He said that experience had a huge, lifelong impact on him.
And here's another one that's kind of hard to square with his job. He is a self-described germaphobe. Think about it. A guy whose whole career is about meeting people, glad-handing, but he's openly talked about how much he dislikes shaking hands, even called it barbaric. It's just one of those personal things that seems totally at odds with being a public figure, especially a politician. Ever heard the name Drumpf? D-R-U-M-P-F? Well, genealogical records show that was the original family name. His ancestors came over from Germany, and somewhere back in the 16 or 1700s, it got changed to Trump. Of course, the name Drumpf got a second life recently when the comedian John Oliver brought it up to make a point about the Trump brand being a kind of modern creation. And that brings us to our final section, a historic presidency. Now, putting all politics aside, it's just a fact that his time in the White House was filled with events that were truly unprecedented in all of American history. Here's a straightforward historical fact. Donald Trump is the only president in U.S. history to have been impeached twice by the House of Representatives.
The first time was in 2019, connected to the Ukraine scandal. The second was in 2021 for incitement of insurrection. And it's also a historical fact that in both of those trials, he was acquitted by the Senate.
So let's just recap for a second. You've got a WWE Hall of Famer who becomes president, a real estate giant who had a failed airline, a self-professed germaphobe who seeks out the most public job on the planet, a teetotaler with his name on a winery. It all adds up to a pretty big puzzle, doesn't it? How can all of these different, sometimes clashing stories exist in just one person? And that is the real question to think about.